The weapons came off. We knew we hit the target because the weapon accuracy it's going to hit within 40 feet.
The words of the B-1 pilot who dropped the bomb on Saddam apparently today. Today, British troops brought freedom to political prisoners in Basra, but even freedom cannot erase the hellish memories of physical torture.
And this is where it's planned and perpetrated. The headquarters of his secret police, this one in Basra. No British soldier has been here yet. Today, as I walked in, I met Iraqis, none of whom had ever been inside willingly. What was to follow was a horrific education in terror and torture. In the smoking basement of the bombed building, a warren of cells. Here, prisoners were tortured.
A lot of torture, a lot of torture. Yes, of course.
People died.
People died, people in prison without court, without trial.
Any people who Saddam did not like?
Of course, of course.
The building is crumbling. Down we went further to cells that had no light, little air, cockroaches, filth, and on the ground a gas mask and bottles of chemicals.
You can imagine this, every day, every month. So many people come here, but we don't know about them at all. The door is closed.
These ordinary Iraqis had been terrified to come here until today. Though one student on the left had been here before.
He was one of the prisons here.
For how long?
8 years.
This man? 8 years. And his crime for 8 years in jail?
Just for Friday prayer.
He prayed too much and was seen as a dangerous radical. More cells. But the Mukhabarat headquarters had more horrors to reveal.
They tied their hands behind and hung them for many days.
These men had relatives murdered here. So desperate are they to tell their story that they began reenacting what they and their brothers and friends had suffered. This man was here too, with his brother.
They sentenced him to death. Yeah, and they sent him to Baghdad, and he was hanged there. Hanged.
There is a prisoner under the name of Ahmed Saeed.
They kept records of prisoners, these and their fingerprints, all that's left of them, apart from the photographs they took of exactly what they'd done. If there is an evil center to Saddam Hussein's regime, then it is surely here and in other places of torture. And there's plenty here that we simply cannot show you. In this block, it was men over here, hundreds of them, and women and children here. To call all this a chamber of horrors is a cliche, and this place is beyond cliche. The hundreds or thousands who died here, who were given no trial, no voice, cry out. On the ground, I found a book called The Psychology of Interrogation. I was glad of the fresh air and glad to leave, glad I could. No one knows yet whether the new Iraq will be the kind of place where these children can grow up free of the fear, the horror of torture. Bill Neely, ITV News, Basra.
We gladly now switch to some good news, and we're happy to report that we do have some. It's out of a U.S. military hospital in Germany. The family of rescued POW Jessica Lynch says their daughter is cheerful. She's steadily recovering from her injuries. Last week, of course, a special ops team rescued the 19-year-old soldier from an Iraqi hospital in Nasiriyah. Doctors say Jessica is now in stable but intensive care. Jessica's parents say they were surprised at their daughter's condition once that they were reunited.
Her spirits was real high, and we was really glad to see her condition, because we was kind of figuring a lot worse, but it worked out real good for us.
That is great news. By the way, when Jessica Lynch returns home to the U.S., a host of lavish gifts will be waiting for her. Donations, presents, all of them pouring in from across the country, including a university scholarship, new cars, money, flowers, and a trip to Hawaii. Very well deserved. We spend, of course, a lot of our day listening to press conferences from the Pentagon and the White House and all over the region. Now it's time to listen to Americans. MSNBC's Jessica Yellen reports now from Dayton, Ohio.
We're at a popular bookstore in Dayton, Ohio.
He's a little more at ease on the street run right now. That's why.
They know more than we do. If they're hiding, they know that there's people that are willing to kill, other than us, like our enemies.
Can you hear him okay, Shepard?
I can hear him when it's up close, yeah.
Okay. Have you heard or seen evidence that that the Republican Guard or Ba'ath Party loyalists are using civilians as shields and using their homes as stations to shoot?
Well, we'll get him back. Lieutenant Colonel Cowan is with us in Washington as well, I believe. Colonel, we know that they've been doing a lot of training. We know they have nefarious things in mind. We're beginning to find a little evidence here and a little evidence there, but when I hear it come out of Rick's mouth, it sounds a lot more real.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Shep, no question about it. And like Colonel Hunt was saying and Mike Battles was saying, I think we're going to continue to uncover things here. I'd like to say something quickly. Rick Leventhal's reporting is spectacular, but he's really gone into a new phase here out there on the front lines, talking in a radio all the time. He mentioned that. If you're an enemy sniper, if you're a bad guy out there watching our U.S. forces advance, and you see somebody with a radio up next to his ear, you don't think he's a Fox News correspondent. You think he's a forward observer calling in artillery or airstrikes. You think he's a platoon commander, an officer of some sort, and he is absolutely a target. So cannot give enough credit to Rick for being out there honestly taking some significant risk.
That's a danger you know about when you go out there, right, Ricky?
Yeah, we knew it was a danger, and I understand that, and I don't want to get shot, so I'm trying to be as careful as I can, but, I'm also trying to report this story in the best way I can, and I'm sorry you couldn't hear all of what Brett Benoit was saying, but he says that he's trained for this, and it's a little unsettling being a target out here, but this is what he does, and he's got a saw machine gun in his arms.
Is that a first? I mean, you said these are all reserves. What was he doing before he ended up on the battlefield?
You worked at Sears, you said? Yeah. Yeah, he worked at Sears. I hold the phone to his head, but you won't be able to hear him anymore. It's this connection problem. Guy works at Sears, and he goes to college. And he's a Marine reservist, and he's been on active duty for 14 months now. Helped out after 9/11. Did you do any of this stuff in Salt Lake? No. But some of the other guys in this battalion went to Salt Lake City and other areas where there was a need during potential terror threats, and they've been on active duty for quite some time, and then were asked to come out here. And as I mentioned, they're the only active duty reservists, Marine infantry in the field out here.
How's he doing? Ask him.
How are you doing? Shepard wants to know.
He's doing okay.
He's doing okay. He's smiling now.
His name again?
You anxious to get home though?
Yeah.
Yeah, a clean environment. It's unbelievable out
What's
here.
The name again, Rick?
Brett Benoit.
Brett Benoit.
From where again? Livermore, California.
From
the Bay
Livermore,
Area.
California, a 21-year-old worker at Sears who joined up to work on the weekends as a reservist and is in Baghdad at the moment with a gun around his neck protecting our freedom. Thank you, sir. We're back with the headlines and more from Rick Leventhal and the rest of our correspondents in the field. We'll go back to Greg Kelly's palace in a minute, too. 21 years old, a Sears worker over there fighting for you. How about that?
Where do you get
Letter home, Apache pilot Joe Bruhl didn't tell his family the full details about his first combat mission. Now he's trying to set the record straight.
In my previous letter, written less than 2 days removed, I only wanted to convey my safety. We did receive heavy fire, and many of our aircraft took significant hits, including mine. I tell you all this not to worry you, but to give you a comfort of knowing what you hear and see is true. And despite that, I am safe and will continue to be.
Different ranks, different anxieties, but all are hoping by the time their letters get back to the US, they too will soon be heading home. Carl Penhall for CNN and Najaf, Iraq.
Take a break, update the night's headlines, talk to General Clark when we get back. Our coverage continues in a moment.
Look at what is happening at this hour. U.S. intelligence sources say they still do not know whether Iraqi President Saddam Hussein was buried in this rubble during Monday's missile strike on Baghdad. Sources tell CNN that an eyewitness thought that he saw Hussein go into the building with one or both of his sons, but there's no confirmation of a British report that UK intelligence believes he then left the building prior to that bombing. U.S. officials say that coalition forces have now hit Iraq with more than 15,000 so-called smart bombs, precision-guided munitions. More than 30,000 sorties have been flown, including more than 1,700 in the last 24 hours. British troops Tuesday sent 10 tankers of fresh water onto the streets of Basra. Water and other necessities have been scarce in Iraq's second biggest city, and there has been looting. British officials say they control 80% of the city, and they say looting will subside as remaining resistance is wiped out. U.S. soldiers yesterday gave Iraqi President Saddam Hussein's enemies something they'd waited a long time for, that weapons. U.S. Special Forces armed free Iraqi fighters in central Iraq, handing over assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and machine guns. They also get guidance on rules of engagement and human rights. And back in the States, Los Angeles Cardinal Roger Mahoney says that U.S. military personnel should not have to die to become U.S. citizens. President Bush has given naturalized citizen rights for U.S. fatalities. Mahoney is calling on the president to change U.S. policy and naturalize all non-citizens who are now wearing a U.S. uniform in the war with Iraq. In other news, police in Bogota, Colombia pulled off a rescue Tuesday that reunited a 3-year-old boy with his family and cheered a nation that was horrified by his kidnapping just a week ago.
Like that one, but for now they think they've got the bulk of the work behind them. Right now in this city, at basically all of the major Iraqi institutions and landmarks, there are M1 tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles parked right inside. Now, less than 12 hours ago, Mal James and myself went out to some of these sites. We saw the Ministry of the Interior, the Justice Ministry. Again, M1 tanks parked right inside. It's hard to imagine that the Iraqis can control anything right now. For now, the 2nd Brigade Combat Team continues to deal with these pockets of resistance. They continue to expand their influence in the city, and they're also waiting for a couple of things. What actually happened to Saddam Hussein? There's big concern about that. Everybody asking us what we know. They're trying to find out as well. And there's also anticipation about when this thing is going to end. Something external has to happen, they say. A prominent Iraqi general surrendering, perhaps the information minister going on air and saying that this thing is over. They're looking for some sort of signal from the Iraqis that they have in fact crumbled, that they have in fact given in. For now, they continue the fight. It's far less intense than it was this time yesterday. That's a good thing. They feel they're winning. They feel like they have this situation under control. Shepard?
Greg, do people ever come walking by? Can people get around in that neighborhood now? Do people ever come walking in, looking through the gates and going, what the heck are they doing in there?
If you talk to the 2nd Brigade Combat Team commander, he says no one moves in Baghdad, this portion of it, unless the 2nd Brigade Combat Team says they can. Now, we see very few civilians. Certainly no curiosity seekers around here. From time to time, we've received mortars at this very position, not far from here. Also, a lot of small arms fire. Not much in the past 12 hours, but before that, a lot. Civilians, we saw some curiosity seekers when we were outside the Ministry of Justice. They came over. Nobody spoke English, that kind of thing. They were just kind of keeping a bit of a respectful distance. Some came up to say hi, but that was about it. Only a handful. We have yet to see anybody tearing down Saddam Hussein posters and that kind of thing. Shep?
Not a lot of residential around there anyway. It's all sort of military and governmental, right?
Well, there are pockets of residential compounds and apartment buildings and that kind of thing throughout the city. Not far is a major residential area, but U.S. military is kind of keen on seizing the symbolic parts of town, those landmarks. it seems like they're not necessarily endeavoring to control or lock down every sector of the city, but to take the important parts to really send a message that this thing is essentially over. We've got control. Now help us take down the Iraqi regime.
And is there a sense that that process is beginning, that winning over of hearts and minds, that convincing of people that we're not here to steal their oil and all the rest?
It's hard to say. We have not seen the popular uprising that the 2nd Brigade Combat Team was looking for. That hasn't happened yet. There have been reports, you've probably heard them, about firefights north of the city where they knew that coalition forces weren't involved. The theory went that some Iraqis were actually engaging Republican Guard troops, but that's all unconfirmed. It comes mostly from Iranian press. We have not seen in the streets any kind of huge popular support. Yesterday, we thought we were going to see some. We thought that there was going to be this popular uprising and they were going to tear down a poster of Saddam Hussein. That didn't happen. Mostly people were interested in helping themselves to some furniture from a furniture store that more or less was being looted. Shep.
All right, Greg, hang out for just a minute. I want to get to Lieutenant Colonel Cowan down in Washington. Colonel, this report, I mean, I'm listening to Rick and a 21-year-old Marine who works at Sears and trying to get an education, who goes off to fight for us in Baghdad. I mean, when was the last time non-active duty personnel were used in such a position?
Rick, Shep, I mean, I was trying to think. I can't recall the time. This
Vietnam?
is astounding to me. We've got a kid here. We had him in Vietnam. We had the 26th Marines
then, I can't
in
think
Vietnam,
of a time.
I can't either, Shep. And it's very interesting when you look at the fact that we've got a lot of regular Marine units around the world, and here we are sending in these reserves, and it's really a testament to how well these reserves are trained, organized. Well, we're willing to put them right there on the front lines as a frontline unit pushing right into the center of Baghdad. It really says a lot about the caliber of young folks we've got out there that are in the military, willing to walk away from their jobs, as this young man and others did, do this fight. And if all goes well here in 6 months, that young man will be back at Sears and other folks will be back at General Foods or whatever. And it's astounding when you look at it.
Man, it surely is. You know, I've talked before about how much I love Tom Brokaw's Greatest Generation, and how amazing and incredible and inspiring it must have been to be around in that time. And then you look at all that's said and written about the people between my age and that guy's age, and now you realize, is it possible now that maybe with all that's going on in this world that we're about to hit another one of those? And I wonder if that guy isn't representative of something just like that.
Well, you heard what Rick said, Shep, that young fellow came in after 9/11. So indeed, this may be another example of how 9/11 transformed all of us, changed our lives forever, and maybe indeed bringing around a new generation of pretty spectacular people, as evidenced by him and others in that reserve unit.
How do you see the moves that we've made playing out strategically now, not emotionally, but strategically on the battlefield? What's left out there, if you got it on the screenwriter?
Well, okay, let me go to it quickly, Shep. Let me point out, here I am, we're in Baghdad. That red place is where the bomb went. Let me remind everybody that this is the area where the 3rd Infantry Division is in. And over here somewhere is where the Marines are, maybe a little bit further off. Up north, we've got people trying to block this road, a little bit further north, but I'm reflecting it here generally, to block that road off to Tikrit. And of course, right here is the area where we went after Saddam. One of the things interesting about Rick's reporting was all of these people inside government buildings. I'm going to go ahead and move the screen to another picture. These people looting government buildings. That tells me that a lot of folks out there don't think that Saddam and company are coming back, because they surely wouldn't be looting government buildings if they thought for 1 minute that somebody was going to be in their house next week looking for the inventory numbers on some of these chairs that they have. So that's a good sign to us, I think. And but we've got a long way to go for that battle is over. I'll go back quickly, if I can, Chip, to this residential picture. Please. Here. As Rick was saying, we've really worked hard to take over key government buildings, but you can see, I see we've gone off the screen there. Anyway, you can see in this in some of that residential pictures that we've got some real small, narrow streets, residential areas. We're doing a good job of staying out of there right now. It seems to me we've not had any of these major armor incursions like we did a few days ago. It almost seems like we're taking a little bit of a break. Rick, as folks are out there doing some patrolling to make sure that things are stable right near and around them, but we're not rolling in with the armor, taking over other big sections of the city, doing this massive show of force. Maybe indeed, as Mike Battles was just saying a little bit before, and even Rick, we're kind of sitting a little bit comfortable right now, taking a breather, letting folks take showers and rest in the presidential palace, and try and get that word out there to the rest of the city and indeed around Iraq that we are here. You know, all the people aren't getting the word on everything. We're seeing the information minister. They're not. They don't have TV and maybe don't have much radio over there. So we're letting the word of mouth get around town that indeed the Americans are there and they're there to stay.
All right, Colonel, thanks very much. I wish we could see that, but here's what happens for our viewers with that thing. We have a bunch of lines coming down from Washington. Thanks, Colonel. I'll get back to you in a minute. We have a bunch of lines coming down from Washington to New York, and one of them brings the Colonel's picture, and one of them brings the screenwriter, and the one that's bringing the screenwriter's got a problem at the moment. So we'll get that fixed. And here's the other thing. We get a lot of questions about the spelling of some of these words over there. Why it is that we spell Basra with an H at the end, and why it is are we spelling it wrong? Is someone else spelling it wrong? They're spelled in squiggle. I mean, and I don't mean that disrespectfully in any way. It's just they use a different character than we do, and when we figure out how to spell something, we just sort of decide, okay, here's how we spell it. They spell it one way, we spell it another way. And as for the bashing coming from the other channel, when you're looking up, you got to bash. Got nothing else to do. We're not worried about it one iota. Okay, we're going to get back to Leventhal in just a minute, who's with the Marines walking the streets in Baghdad. First, I want to get information about the city of Basra, with or without an H. It's now under control of the coalition, but there is another battle in Iraq's second largest city, restoring law and order to the streets. Let's go to Fox correspondent William Langeness, who covers that city from right across the border in Kuwait. Hello, William.
Well, Shepard, if Basra is going to be the prototype for Baghdad, indeed it is probably useful for us to see how that is evolving. Right now, it is a total mess. It is a looter's paradise. You can look at the pictures yourself. There is no law and order. Police who belong to the Ba'ath Party, they've fled. The Sheraton Hotel, which got hit on Monday, looters took tables, chairs, carpet, even the lobby's grand piano. It continued on Tuesday until it was nothing left. Finally, the Brits put two tanks outside so they didn't take the windows and the fixtures as well. Young men cruising Basra in pickup trucks, even bicycles, grabbing what they could find. Ceiling fans, car seats, furniture, wooden planks. The telephone system in that city is dead. The looters stripped the utility there bare. The water mains have been broken into. One reason they're not all getting water now. Now, the military indeed stepped in to maintain some order, especially when they saw a food convoy getting hit. Looked like people were actually stealing from other thieves. So it is, and it is true that British Defense Secretary Jeff Hoon several days ago actually encouraged looting as a way to, as one of your analysts said, to encourage this idea that there was anarchy, convincing some of the Fedayeen and the police to leave. Now, from a military point of view, however, the Brits do seem to have the city under control. They've seen how it is. You've seen how it has been received by people there. Huge crowds celebrating the end of Saddam, taking down the statues, throwing another one into the river. Today there was a 2-hour meeting, yesterday was a 2-hour meeting with the tribal leader to create a new government. They say the sheikh is a credible Shiite Muslim. He is not part of the Ba'ath Party, a respected tribal leader from a local town, there to form a transitional government, hire his own aides. It is consistent, of course, with President Bush's pledge to move Iraqis into positions of authority as quickly as possible. Having said that, as the regime does crumble, some opposition leaders, Iraqi opposition leaders, are back in Iraq. Among them, Ahmad Chalabi. He is a leader of the Iraqi National Congress, a very prominent figure in what we believe to be at least a transitional government. Chalabi has with him several hundred supporters who style themselves as freedom fighters, but they're really there to help the military work as guides and interpreters in Qusar, and they were in Nasiriyah yesterday. Chalabi's group is one of many opposition forces, and one that is going to, these Iraqi exiles, according to Condoleezza Rice and others in the administration, will help at least with the transition. Maybe they'll only be there temporarily, not as a head of state, vis-a-vis what has happened in Afghanistan, someone coming out of Pakistan there. Finally, Shepard, I wanted to mention when it comes to this aid and how it is being portrayed in Basra and the fall of it and the reconstruction, I read some papers in the British, or some articles in the British paper today saying, quoting people in Basra being frustrated. Listen, this is a third world city, and it is not going to be first world overnight. They're frustrated because there's not water and humanitarian aid and the cupboards are bare. Remember, this city has basically been under, they're living under poverty for dozen years at least, and so it's not going to change overnight, if you will. Back to you.
Yeah, no changes overnight, not there anywhere else. William Lajeunesse live with us in the second city of Basra. Rick Leventhal is back on the line with us. He's now with the 1st Division, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, and he's wandering around Baghdad without a care or something. Rick?
Well, that's not entirely accurate.
Exactly.
Of course I care, and I'm trying to keep my guard up and my head on a swivel. Baghdad, the city itself, does appear to be waking up a bit. We've got some people out on the street now. I did see one store open up across the street, Shepard. You were asking where people get food and water and that sort of thing, and I guess there are some stores open, although one of the Marines I was talking to a short time ago said everything was closed yesterday. We did just hear an explosion a short distance away. Another Marine I'm standing with thinks it was a shoulder-fired missile, small, which is a Marine shoulder-fired missile, so that's a good thing. And we did just hear another fighter jet scream overhead. Corporal Rick Hudson, can you step in for a second? He is a police officer in Livermore, California, correct? I see you with a pretty significant weapon there.
It's weird how Rick's equipment only works when it's on Rick. I mean, are they like, I don't know, is there a chip in there or something? Is it, what's up with that, Rick? What's that, Rick?
You more readily here than out on the streets.
Can you guys hear it, Corporal? Okay.
I can now.
Okay.
But we couldn't at the beginning.
Are you? Wait. At this point, I mean, there have been a lot of shootings.
Oh, absolutely. It's just something you have to deal with, and you just can't think about it too much. Just something to keep your eyes open and make sure all your men stay safe, sir.
And what goes through your mind as you hit on the criminals?
Just making sure to keep my eyes open, keep alert on everything that's around us, just to make sure that bring all the guys home safely, sir.
Excellent idea, Corporal Rick Hudson. Thank you. We are out on the streets of Baghdad, Shepard, on the east side of the city.
Wah, 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 wah. It's like a bad cell phone, isn't it? But it works very well. I want to, hopefully Rick is still trying to get the thing worked out. And I want to, when Rick first ended up out there and we were doing these little late night chats that everybody said nobody will watch and it's stupid, well, we were kind of enjoying it, so we just kept doing it. We're doing this 24 hours a day. I mean, we do the same thing all the time. Come on. If there's news, by the way, if anything happens, we're going to go to it right then. But listen to this that I got from Ron Phelps. Yep, Ron. Listen to what Ron sent, because Rick is with a new group tonight, you know. Ron says, please see if Rick can find Mark A. Patterson, LCPL, Marine Reserve from SLC, Charlottesville, Virginia. His uncle, me, and his aunt, Karen Patterson Phelps, want to hear his voice. Wow. He's in Baghdad, writes Ron, and he's okay. Yahoo. Hadn't heard from him. He's a reservist. Didn't even know where he was, hasn't had any correspondence, most likely, before this war even began, had no idea even where he was. He's in Baghdad, exclamation point, and he's okay. Apparently he is okay, Ron, because Rick says nobody there's been hurt. So yeah, he's okay. Rick, you still there? He's not still there. I got to hit a commercial. We'll check in with Rick and see, Ron, if we can't find Mark A. Patterson, LCPL.
Joining me to map out the follow-up, MSNBC military analyst, retired Army General Montgomery Meigs. General, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
All right, what's first, sir? How do you start this?
Well, I think you started from the perspective of how important is that specific event to what you need in the short term and the long term. In the short term, I think you press on with exactly what they're doing and chop up the city, cordon it off, and continue to take down the leadership.
Is a major mission in order here, and do you need a lot of people on the ground in a controlled area to really examine that bomb site?
Yeah, if you were going to go forensically investigate in that location, you would need engineers with some experts on failure in large structures underground, because once you clear that thing out and get people in there, you don't know what else is going to cave in. So you got to have some really high quality people in there in terms of engineering talent, people to remove all the stuff. And then you're going to have to secure that rascal, because you're right down in that neighborhood, which is probably not real friendly right now. And remember, in complex terrain, a neighborhood like that can be used as a way to infiltrate troops in to pin you down. And right now, the last thing in the world you want is to be pinned down in some dark corner of the city where you do not want to keep troops indefinitely.
General, also on the question of the timing, is it already too late really to launch that mission? I mean, as Carl Rochelle was breaking the news of the bombing route and the Pentagon's optimism last night, we were already seeing the video of what were presumably Iraqis bulldozing the debris, the video we just showed. There's no integrity of the crime scene, if you will.
I suspect there's something parked right overhead watching the whole thing, and if at some point, the way I would work it is if some point I needed to go in there quickly after they did all the heavy work, I might do that. But I suspect you just don't want a couple of battalions tied down doing nothing but that at this point in the battle.
From the forensic side and actually what you could go and look for, I mean, if there is, as Andrea Mitchell reported, there is no DNA record file for him, what on earth could they be looking for? I mean, his mustache? What's left if the job was done?
Well, we don't know. I mean, first of all, I'm not sure how deep that bunker really was. I remember in Bosnia, there was a big command and control bunker in the middle of a place called Mount Vis, where Mladic used to hang out. And that rascal was deep in the granite of that mountain, and you were not going to get it to 4 of these types of bombs. You just couldn't. So if the bunker's deep enough, we may have only damaged the bunker, and you still may have some structural integrity in there, even if the shock of the blast, killed everybody there.
Good grief. General, I was asking this question last night, and I never got a convincing answer to it. What detail or details about this story that Saddam might be dead strikes you as perhaps more convincing compared to similar stories after the raid on his location the night the war started?
I don't have any more details, but he's got fewer places to go now, and as he moves from place to place, the more people we have in the city and the more people who are willing to give us information, the easier it's going to be for us to see him and target him. That wasn't the case early on. Now we've got a much better chance of him popping up in some way where we've still got a time that's actionable to go after him.
Like the end game in a chess game. If there are only so many pieces left, one of them has to be him. Retired General Monty Meggs mapping it out for us tonight. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you again. They will probably not earn the fame of Paul Tibbets, who piloted the Enola Gay, the craft that dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. But Lieutenant Colonel Frank Swan is in the news tonight, all right. He was running that B-1 bomber that went on the food run yesterday to the Al-Sa restaurant in the Mansour neighborhood of Baghdad. Whether or not Lieutenant Colonel Swan got Saddam Hussein, history will have to tell us. But as far as he's concerned, it was a mission accomplished.
When we got the word that it was a priority leadership target, immediately you get kind of an adrenaline rush. The crew does, but then you fall back to your original training that says, "Hey, let's get the job done." And we knew we had to react quickly to it. And then coming off target myself, it was like, I personally was never prouder to be in the Air Force. It's actually this was the big one, which we thought it was based on everything we heard. And everything went as advertised. The weapons came off. We knew we hit the target.
Back to Baghdad, and Samia Nakul has reported from that city for this network on this program. She is the bureau chief of the international news service Reuters. She may need surgery now to treat shrapnel wounds incurred today as the inevitable finally came to pass. 3 journalists were killed in Baghdad, many more besides Ms. Nakul injured. 25 reporters from Abu Dhabi television were trapped in a basement when their building was leveled. Al Jazeera's office was hit. ITV's Neil Connery was there for the tank attack on the de facto home of foreign journalists, the Palestine Hotel, and for the U.S. denials that the coalition was targeting reporters.
The American tank on the left is about to fire a round into the Palestine Hotel used by the world's media, where we are filming these pictures.
In taking out Saddam Hussein, they insist it's a Hollywood production. Shep?
Very interesting. A lot of minds to change. Heather Nauert live with us from our newsroom in Amman, Jordan. Great to see you, Heather. Have a good trip. Keep us updated. Piece by piece, Iraq is falling into coalition control, it would appear. Now the United States military is tightening its grip on Baghdad. Let's go to Colonel Cowan now in Washington with some ideas about how it's happening. Colonel, we got the hitch and the satellites get along fixed, and maybe you can show us what you were talking about with control in city there.
Well, Shep, I'll go to the screenwriter here quickly. Let me get a picture here of the residential area and just point out this is a residential area, Shep, that was hit, that we thought Saddam was in. I think that bomb may have fallen somewhere over here, and I'll point out that right in this area is a religious site, another mosque. Saddam's not afraid, if indeed it was him, to get close to those things. But the real purpose of this picture was to show really the complexity of these residential areas and how difficult it would be for our troops to move into areas and try and control them. That is, if we had three forces, and you can't go in a single line because you don't want to be walking along on one line there, one avenue of approach, and having bad guys coming at you from all sides. So indeed, we'd want to move along on an axis here. And you can see as you get down these narrow streets, a lot of houses in here, that it just gets very, very difficult. So again, we're doing a good job right now of staying out of these residential areas, Shep, holding on to these key government facilities and positions. And really, actually, we're watching the bad guys come out, as I think that was Rick reporting about these boats coming across the river to try and strike at us. We're letting these guys come after us right now. That's probably a pretty good plan.
Is it your sense that that might be a long-term plan, that we let the fight come to us for a while?
Probably so, Shep, and maybe not. Maybe we just don't have any big strategic targets that we'd like to take out. And bouncing back to some of the things going on inside the city, those scenes we just saw of Basra, where you've got the population running all over and the British forces trying to help contain the looting that's going on and standing there to pass out humanitarian supplies. In the back of the minds of every one of those soldiers out there, those guys have to be worried about any one of those people in that mob that they're trying to help and trying to support and trying to control a little bit. Might be one guy running up there with a satchel charge or a grenade or something that could be after him. When I hear Rick or Greg, you were talking to Greg a little bit earlier, when I hear them reporting from Baghdad about the civilian population, you can imagine that they've got to be worried about the exact same things. And if I could slip on quickly to what Heather was just saying about a lot of people throughout the Middle East, we've heard that from more than one report, believe that this is all a staged Hollywood production. That goes back to this issue, Shep, of we need to own that information minister. We need to be standing there on the platform with him next time, a couple Delta Force guys with their arm over his shoulder while he tells everybody that Baghdad is really safe and the Americans aren't really there.
Don't you wonder why we haven't done that already?
Yeah, I honestly do, Shep, because this guy is a thorn in our side, and not a little thorn. He's a big thorn. Again, he's not so much broadcasting to the Iraqi people as he is to the rest of the Arab world, and they're listening carefully to what he's saying, and they're believing what he's saying. And I'm not sure why we haven't done it yet. He's moving around quite a bit. We certainly know where he is.
Palestine
a lot
Hotel.
of the time. We certainly have the ability to nab this guy if we want to. I'm sure there are reasons. Maybe we just don't want to put any of our guys at risk to do that. But it would be nice to see him in our hands, where the message that was going out was a lot different than the one that is.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia with the latest in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Well, coalition forces tightening their grip on Baghdad. The Pentagon now claiming sole ownership of all Iraqi airspace, including over the capital city and Tikrit, Saddam's hometown. That announcement coming just a day after a coalition airstrike targeted the Iraqi dictator. 4 2,000-pound bombs slamming into the Al Mansour neighborhood, where U.S. intelligence reported that Saddam was meeting with key members of his regime. The Pentagon says it's not known yet if Saddam died in that strike, but the Guardian newspaper is now reporting that British intelligence says Saddam was not in the building at the time of that attack. Well, 2 U.S. airmen are missing in action after their F-15E Strike Eagle went down in Iraq. The Pentagon won't say where, but sources tell Fox News the fighter jet crashed in hostile territory. The cause of the incident is being investigated. The 2 men and their aircraft belong to the 4th Fighter Wing out of the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. In southern Iraq, the city of Basra has been without water since last week. So today, British forces arrived with 10 tankers filled with drinkable water, and they were overwhelmed by a rush of thirsty Iraqis. And British engineers are scrambling now to get the city's water treatment plant back online. Richard Jones, the new U.S. ambassador to Kuwait, was given a tour of an army camp in southern Iraq. The facility near Qasr houses up to 5,000 Iraqi POWs. An army commander there stressed that all prisoners are being treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. And those are your latest headlines in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I'm Donna Fiducia. Now back to Shepard Smith and more Fox News Live.
Well, whether Saddam is dead or alive, Baghdad not the safest place to be right now. We're going to get to our correspondent Rick Leventhal, who is wandering the streets of Baghdad with a Marine Reserve unit as they look for the bad guys to come out and shoot. That's exactly what they're doing, and we'll go to that. We're also going to go to Greg Kelly, who's at the Kelly Palace, formerly known as the Saddam Palace, but Greg seems to be the most high-profile person there at this point, at least the one we see the most, don't get me wrong. We'll talk to him in just a minute about this report from the other day when we first took over that palace, when coalition forces did, and Greg Kelly was speaking to a man from the Army who said, well, we're going to go over there and talk to this information ministry guy in just a minute, and we'll let him know that we're in town. We'll find out about that conversation, but word now on Saddam, mission at hand from the Pentagon. Shift change has happened there. Let's get to Kelly Wright, who's live now at the familiar blue wall. Hello, Kelly. Good morning.
Well, Shep, good morning to you. You know, that is the big question of today. Is Saddam Hussein dead or alive? Now, President Bush doesn't know. Defense officials here at the Pentagon say they don't know. But the Bush administration and the Pentagon agree that it doesn't matter. Either way, the Republican or the Iraqi Republican Guard is crumbling, as well as the regime. And they do say, in fact, President Bush saying that it could end in a matter of days. Still, defense officials want to know if Saddam Hussein, his two sons, and suspected Iraqi regime leaders are among the dead in this 60-foot crater of rubble created by 4 2,000-pound precision bombs. An Allied B-1 bomber dropped the bombs on the building after credible human intelligence reports indicated that Saddam Hussein was there. 2 British newspapers, however, are reporting that Saddam Hussein and his sons Uday and Qusay survived the attack Monday afternoon. British intelligence sources reportedly say Saddam had been in the building earlier but left minutes before the bombs hit. Meantime, defense officials at the Pentagon say it's too early to determine if Saddam escaped that blast.
What we have for battle damage assessment right now is essentially a hole in the ground, a site of destruction where we wanted it to be, where we believed high-value targets were, where intelligence led us to believe that. We do not have hard battle damage assessment on exactly what individual or individuals were on site.
Beyond the site to the north and west of Baghdad, Allied forces are shifting their bombing campaign to northern cities while still focusing on close urban air support in and around Baghdad. The Air Force says tonight the coalition aircraft conducted a bombing campaign in Mosul, Kirkuk, and Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. They're trying to degrade Iraqi defenses before coalition ground forces move in. As coalition ground forces move through the heart of Baghdad, the area has become increasingly dangerous for everyone, including journalists. At the Palestine Hotel Monday, 2 TV cameramen from the Ukraine and Spain were killed and 3 others wounded. CENTCOM says U.S. troops observed snipers firing from the hotel when they gave return fire. A Jordanian journalist working for Al Jazeera was also killed when the network's Baghdad office was hit during an airstrike.
War zone is a dangerous place. Baghdad in particular, we believe, would be a dangerous place. We continue to warn people, we continue to warn news organizations about the dangers. We've had conversations over the last couple of days. News organizations eager to get their people unilaterally into Baghdad. And we are saying it is not a safe place, you should not be there.
And defense officials here at the Pentagon say there's still a lot of noise on the ground. I mean, there's a lot of activity, as we're seeing from our embed reports, Rick Leventhal as well as Greg Kelly, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from them throughout the morning. Shep?
All right, Greg Kelly live for us at the Pentagon. If stuff gets hopping, we'll get back to Greg. Toot sweet, guaranteed. All right, we were talking a little while ago to Rick Leventhal, who was on the streets of Baghdad patrolling with this young Marine, a reservist who is now clearly active on the streets of Baghdad, and his name is Brett Benoit. He works for Sears, and he's going through school, and he's out there with an M16 around his neck at the moment. Well, we have letters from 6 different people who know this guy and are going all off about what a great guy he is. And then from our brain room, which is like our research office here, information about Sears and what it is that Sears is doing for people who are in the military. As it turns out, Sears is keeping their jobs for them no matter how long they're gone. It's been 18 months for that particular man that he's been active, and no matter what, they're keeping their job. They're making up the difference in pay with the amount that the military gives them and other family benefits. So according to our brain room, at least, Sears is carrying the flag, and that's good to know. So Brett has a job. Brett Benoit, that is. Bear certainly has a job, but for the moment, it's nap time for him. All right, some of the sights and sounds of the war. We put endless amounts of videotape together on this war, accompanied with our reporters, information and all the rest, and sometimes a lot of really good stuff gets left on the cutting room floor, and that's the job of one group, to find and put together with a little slice, another slice of the big war pie, and we like showing that about this time of night, so take a look.
يعني ربما اقتحام الجسر بيتم بعدد قليل من أبائهم تطلق.
هناك عمليات القصف تتواصل وعنيفة
على الطرف الآخر للجسر.
هذا قصف بجانب كاميرا تلفزيون أبو ظبي. منذ دقائق أن الجميع نزل على الأرض، لم يعد أحد على السطح.
Right now we're in the Secretariat, which is, as I understand, a Special Republican Guard strong point, surrounded by barracks and other towers.
And there you go, some of the sights and sounds of the war, some of them very brutal, and some of them a little more lighthearted. That's the palace. I've been calling it Kelly Palace. They've got the camera on the shoulder now and are showing us around. I wonder I guess if he's alive, he could be watching. They seem to watch us a little bit over there. Saddam, there's a tank in your front yard. Would you look at that? I guess this means we're taking a break first. When we come back from the break, I'm going to talk to Greg Kelly about this thing with the information minister and whatever that was all about. And he's going to give us a little tour of Kelly's palace straight away.